I think, I set out to make a movie with two actors in a room thinking that it would be a fun and gentle experience. When you are locked in that room for that long, dealing with emotions that are this intense, it can really have an effect on you. So one of the big learning curves for me was how to just mitigate that, not just for myself, but for my cast, and to really make sure that we all felt safe on an emotional level, psychological level, as we were going through the fire together.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, a pop star and a costume designer engage in a psychosexual affair in director David Lowery's psychological thriller, Mother Mary. The film tells the story of iconic pop star Mother Mary as she reunites with her estranged best friend and former costume designer, Sam. In need of a dress for her new tour, Mary asks Sam to help her, causing long-buried wounds, past traumas, and specters to return to the spotlight. In addition to Mother Mary, Lowery's other directorial credits include the feature films Peter Pan and Wendy, The Green Knight, The Old Man and the Gun, and A Ghost Story, and episodes of the series Skeleton Crew, Strange Angel, Breakthrough, and Rectify. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theater in New York, Lowery spoke with director Antonio Campos about filming Mother Mary. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
It's a pleasure to be here talking to David about this monumental, beautiful piece of filmmaking. So I guess I'll just start with the very obvious question of where did the seed of this idea, where did this thing come from?
It was sort of a tripartite bolt of inspiration that primarily occurred while we were shooting The Green Knight back in 2019, so quite a while ago. I wanted to make a movie with two actors in a room. That was part of it. I was really excited about that prospect, especially after shooting one scene in The Green Knight with two actors in a room that had a great time on. I was like, this is great. Give me more of this, please. Less actors on horses, more actors sitting in chairs. And then for the longest time, I wanted to make a movie that involved pop music in some way. I really love pop music. I've grown to love it even more, and I wanted to capture some ephemeral essence of it in a movie. And I didn't know if that would be a movie about a pop star or a movie that just had pop stars in it. When I made A Ghost Story, we cast Kesha in it just because I wanted her energy in the movie, even though she wasn't singing. And then the third thing was I just was having while we were shooting The Green Knight, one of those really hard days on set where you go home at the end of the day and wonder, why are we doing this? What is it about making movies or about creating things that compels us to put ourselves through the ringer to such an extent, as we all know happens on set from time to time. And that night, I just started writing a conversation about that was really between myself and me. But I gave those versions of me names and very quickly was like, this will be my pop star movie. I'm gonna make one of them a pop star. And very quickly, the other version of myself became a fashion designer, probably because I wish I dressed better.
You dress very well.
Thank you. I'm trying. I'm working on it. And that helped me work through that issue that night and over the course of that production. But then I was left with these characters who now very quickly had lives of their own. And over the course of the next few years, I went off and made another movie and some other projects. But I kept working on this. And in 2022, I think I had a draft of the script that was pretty close to this, and we decided it was time to see it through.
It's really, there's so many layers to this film. It's really stuck with me since I watched it. And something I was thinking a lot about today was it is a portrait of the collaborative process and the way the collaborative process can be so fulfilling, but also how it can be kind of a toxic dynamic, and how after a certain point you start to, even like as a filmmaker, you work with the same people over and over, and it's a wonderful thing, but then you go, wait, is this actually me, or is who I am as a filmmaker actually the combination of all these people together, or this other person? So I think it's just a fascinating thing that you're sort of breaking down and exploring here.
It's part of the organism of any collaborative art form, but for me, I certainly recognize that in filmmaking, which is like, I know I am able to bring something of my own to every project. Like, I'm confident in that, but I also know that I have confidence in all of my collaborators to make it's personal to them as well. And yet at the end of the day, you know, it's still going to say directed by David Lowery, and that is, there's an inherent tension there.
Yeah. You know, the other thing that really struck me reading the notes about the film, which I brought up to you outside, was some of your references, some of the citations really excited me, because there were films that I love that I don't often see cited, especially cited together. The ones that really struck me were Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant by Fassbinder, which you guys should see if you haven't seen it. Eyes Wide Shut, which I realized after a certain point, I was like, oh man, Eyes Wide Shut has left a huge impression. I mean, it's a big part of, a big influence. I feel like it's in a lot of the stuff I do. And then Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is one of my favorite films. I somehow had the poster and the t-shirt before the film came out, and I went, and I had the Mike Mignola comic book, and I went that night, the first night, and I watched it maybe 4 times in the theater.
Wait, were you like 9?
I was 9 or 10, and I was obsessed with that movie.
Well, you were very lucky, because my parents wouldn't let me go see it, but they would let me have the screenplay book, the novelization, the soundtrack, and the Mike Mignola comic book. So I had all of the ephemera, but I didn't see the movie until I was like 14.
But they let you have all the other stuff?
Yeah, that was basically how my entire childhood was. And now I've got
awesome.
A piece of the castle. Someone on eBay who is selling pieces of the castle.
The real castle.
The miniature.
Oh wow.
The miniature from the film.
Oh wow.
And I want to get all of them and reconstruct it.
I saw Roman Coppola's list of books that he referenced, and I bought them all on eBay.
Dreamers of Decadence.
That one I have, but all the visual effects, special effects books that he had, that he used to build it. What was like Petra von Kant and Eyes Wide Shut? I think those references are obvious. In terms of something like Dracula, is it the Gothic quality? Is it the wardrobe, the costumes?
Yeah, there's the Gothic, overall Gothic milieu of this film, which is inclusive of Dracula, but also things like the Bronte sisters. Like, it's got that sort of like old English manor Gothic quality to it. But Dracula has an operaticness to it, and I really love that. And I like when movies reach an operatic peak, and I wanted this one to do the same, not just in terms of the mise en scène of the movie, but in terms of the costumes, in terms of the music, the filmmaking language, which starts off very static and gradually becomes something far more florid. Eiko Ishioka, who did the costumes for Dracula, is a huge inspiration for me. Not just from that film, but the Cell, the work she did with Tarsem, but then going back to Mishima with Paul Schrader, where she did not only the costumes, but the production design. And when at a certain point in this movie, when we were running out of locations and we were like, how do we shoot some of the sequences in this movie? We looked at Mishima and we're like, how did they do that? And there's little traces of influence there for sure.
Well, I mean, the film, the other film I would reference too, I think, in the way that it so cleverly incorporated theatrical tricks in a cinematic way, would be One from the Heart, where the film sort of like, it's sort of, the artifice of it that never takes over from the how grounded the storytelling and the characters are, and I think that this is that.
Great, it worked because a lot of that was, we were flying by the seat of our pants. We were not setting out to make a movie in which reality and memory sort of merged in the way that they do in the finished film. There was a much different approach, and at a certain point in prep, pretty late in the game, we realized we just couldn't pull off what we were thinking of pulling off.
What's an example of that?
We were going to basically make 2 different movies. We were going to have the movie where Mother Mary and Sam are in a barn and they're telling each other stories, and then we were going to film those stories as a separate film. And that film would have been a huge stylistic departure. It would have been inclusive of these concert sequences that do exist in the movie, but all of the other parts, the hotel room seance, there was a whole, a world tour montage that at a certain point we realized we cannot do. And that was ultimately reduced. I remember multiple times being like, okay, we can't do this. How do we take 6 pages of script and do it in a single shot with no dialogue? And those sequences are what manifested in the film.
That's amazing. And so you realized that in prep. So it was like you had already started planning, so you knew what you were doing when you went in.
Yeah, and we were location scouting for all these sequences that we didn't shoot. And at a certain point, we're like, we can't do this many company moves. We'll never finish.
Right.
And so it was really just getting together with Andrew, our cinematographer, and Francesca, our production designer, and rethinking how to accomplish the same narrative beats that the story needed in a completely different way. And ultimately, as often happens in those situations, it's better. Like, I'm much happier with this version of it, but it was certainly not, it's not what we set out to do.
Yeah, I can't even, I mean, it feels like that version of it, which would feel much more grounded and sort of have I think, a less haunting effect.
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Something else that I was really curious about is, did you rehearse this like a play? I mean, you have these two actors, it's all about them and their emotional journey. Like, what was your process with that?
I've never had the luxury of an intense rehearsal process. I suspect many people in this room have read the Sidney Lumet book where he describes the quintessential, like, what you want a rehearsal to be for weeks on end. And I've always wondered what that would be like. I don't know if I would like it, but I've always wondered what it would be like. And so with this film, I felt this is the time to figure it out and to try that out. So we had a fair amount of rehearsal time, but what we really focused on was the first act of the movie, that first really extended scene, or a few scenes, but really once they get to that barn. And we had that worked out really well. We rehearsed it around a table, and then we marked out, with tape on the floor, the location. And then once the location became available to us, we rehearsed it there. And for the first 2 weeks of the shoot, we were building off of that rehearsal and really had worked through every word and every syllable. And we knew where the pitfalls were, but we knew we had a plan for how to overcome them if problems arose on set, if we needed to change things, if we needed to, work through different blocking. We just had an understanding. And then the dance sequence occurs, and everything after that, we had rehearsed a few times. We'd made our way through it, but we were really, once we got past that dance, we also stopped shooting in sequence. And we realized not only is the movie now opening up in a special and unexpected way, but our process is also doing the same. And we, for lack of a better way of putting it, just started fumbling around in the dark, looking for something that we knew was out there, but we didn't really know how to find it.
And so so when you hit those kind of moments, would you just stop and then talk about what you were going to try next? Like, how did you work through those on set?
Sometimes it was a lot of blocking rehearsal. We'd spend a lot of time with that in the morning. And then we would also just we wouldn't let ourselves stop until we felt like we had done a good job. That was sort of like the rule. It's like, if anyone, whether it was myself or any of the cast, felt like they had a different idea or wanted to try something differently or just felt like they could do better, we would always start over again with any scene or with any take, which is a dangerous place to be, but this is the type of movie that needed that. And then there were also times where we just were like, something's not working, we don't know what it is, let's stop for a while. And that's also a very scary thing to do on a moving train of a production, but it was really necessary sometimes to just like clear the air, kind of like recalibrate ourselves. So we were just, there was one day where we had a big, however many page sequence that we were supposed to shoot, and we got a little ways into it and it was just not working. And we stopped and thought about it, and we're like, okay, we've got these other little pieces, these shots that we can get. Let's shoot those for the rest of the day and then come back to the scene tomorrow with a fresh perspective. And that was, thankfully, had incredible producers, incredible first AD who really helped us sort of like facilitate that type of exploration.
That's kind of a dreamy place to be.
It's a slippery slope, but you take it right to the edge and sometimes go over.
Well, I think I always, I have a lot of anxiety, and so I always have to like over prepare. But I also sort of love the chaos and the things that kind of reveal themselves on set. But you have this kind of, you're in this box of 12 hours for the day, and it always feels like, it's not all the time, but a lot of the time you feel like, did I dig deep enough here? Did I explore the thing to as far as I could? So the idea to stop and go back is so exciting, but also really scary.
Yeah, I mean, you're always like, what am I going to lose because of this? Like, you have to mentally prepare yourself, like saying, if we are going to dig deeper, there's going to be a cost, and I don't know how big that cost will be. Maybe it's a shot tomorrow, maybe it's a scene next week, but you have to be prepared for that. Right. I always am of the opinion that whatever you're shooting in that moment is the most important thing. And that if you do have to pay the consequences, you can figure that out after you've wrapped. But when you're in the moment and you're with the actors and there's a need to keep pushing further and to digging deeper, it feels to me almost morally wrong to stop short of that.
And the visual sequences in this were these musical interludes, these places where you're going back in time and sort of in these kind of nebulous spaces, these liminal spaces. Were those all very mapped out, or did you also sort of take a similar approach? I mean, I find the poetry in your movies and the way that you point the camera in corners and at places that one might not think to point a camera. Like, are you also very free in those moments, or do you feel more constrained?
Some of them are a little bit more planned out than others. There were like certain sequences in this movie that were storyboarded, or that I storyboarded myself, or that we would work through with the cast like on a weekend and with Artemis and just take photos to sort of like plan out what we were doing. And then other times you just see things a different way when you're on set. You wander off to the side and you're like, oh wait, why aren't we over here instead? There was a fair amount of like, transitions are always well planned out. We always figure out how to get from one moment to the next, whether it's within a scene or crossing time and space. And then the hotel room scene with Twigs, for example, was one that with FKA Twigs, was one that I did some rough storyboards for. And then we worked it through on a Saturday with Twigs to just kind of figure out what the blocking because it was a fair amount of choreography.
That's one of my favorite sequences. That seance thing is just
that was one amazing. Where we just were like really finding new stuff while we were shooting. And it was like, not just in terms of the camera, but like lighting. Like can we have a lighting cue that does this? Even in post, like I was like, oh, we should have had a lightning flash. And thank God you can now add things like that. Right. And really trying to build that sequence. What was on page, I mean, the text was exactly what happened. Like that, we didn't change the dialogue or anything like that. But what was happening in that room was all really, we were exploring that scene while we were shooting it. And the same goes for anything with a seance in this movie. We did a lot of exploring.
And well, I had a couple questions, but I guess with that scene specifically, I just to take a moment, because I think FKA Twigs' performance in this is really exceptional and really surprised me. At one point, I was like, "Wait, is that FKA?" Like it was just, I was like, "Is this an actress that looks like FKA Twigs?" And I'm just curious about her process as an actress, and I'm just kind of curious about how she works and how you guys work together.
I think we met up on set maybe a week before we started shooting. She came in for a fitting. We'd spoken before, we'd Zoomed, and she approached it very much as an actor. She was not coming to set as FKA Twig. She was wanting to play this character who understands Irish. She can speak in Irish, do Irish incantations. And then again, the script was a little simpler. There was a little bit of movement described where she would like go to a wall and start like pressing up against the drywall. And Annie and Michaela would have felt that in the present. But really a lot of that material in that sequence came out of just working through with her and seeing what she could bring to it. And she is an incredible actor, but she is also an incredible dancer, and being able to harness that, not just because she is FK Twigs and can do that, but because it's appropriate for that scene. To say, like, how would you, like, I would ask her, like, how would you play this moment where you're getting possessed? And it would start with just like the flutter of the eyelids, or the things I would describe. Like that, I think the script was very like, her eyes roll back and then turn a different color or something like that. Like very, very, classic Exorcist stuff. But then it would always she would add a little elevation to it. And it was like, okay, what if you rise on this line? And then we just kept taking it from there all the way to the idea of her like scratching at this door rather than just pressing it, but just actually like using this knife that was the ceremonial dagger that was around her. I think that might have even been her idea too, to have that. And
but then did she always cut the hand?
No, and so that was, and then Annie brought that. So the scene originally ended differently, and Annie suggested, like, what if she cuts my hand open? And I can't even imagine what the movie would have been like without that. Now that's so thoroughly this movie. Like it is on point, and yet it wasn't part of the script until we started rehearsing it.
That's amazing. Well, I want to give people the chance to ask any questions. Anybody out there has any questions?
It's also a movie that is definitely takes a second to process. So no.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. The question is, what were some of the biggest challenges, and how did you overcome them, and what did it ultimately teach you?
I think, I set out to make a movie with two actors in a room thinking that it would be a fun and gentle experience. And then you write a script like this and realize that when you are locked in that room for that long, dealing with emotions that are this intense, it can really have an effect on you. And so one of the big learning curves for me was how to just mitigate that, not just for myself, but for my cast, and to really make sure that we all felt safe on an emotional level, psychological level, as we were going through the fire together. That was something I'd never experienced before. And again, like I've made movies with actors before. I love working with actors, but I've never been through the ringer with a cast the way we were on this movie. And that is something that was a huge learning curve for me, but a really beautiful one.
Would you say this is one of your most personal movies?
Yeah, maybe this one and Pete's Dragon, like the two. What a double feature, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like I intentionally set out to be a little bit less. I wasn't trying to obfuscate the personal as I normally do in this one. It's a little, the layers are a little less opaque.
Anybody else? Does Hilda ever bring those things to Sam that she asked for?
There's an amazing 10-minute sequence in this movie involving those things that maybe will be on the Blu-ray. It's a beautiful sequence, and you do get to see what she brought her.
It's funny because that was the other thing I was thinking about, was the sort of the chain of the creative process, in that you have Mary, and then you have Sam and that dynamic, but then you could also make the movie about Sam and Hilda, and what is that dynamic, and what does she take from Hilda, and how much of her is Hilda?
It is, and there is, aside from that 10-minute sequence, there's a lot more Hilda that we filmed, because I love Hunter so much that I kept writing more for her.
She's amazing.
And we just kept shooting. So there's a lot of Hilda tangents that maybe we can spin off into its own film.
I mean, I would advocate for you to work with all of these actors again. I mean, they clearly trusted you in a very deep, profound way, and I think that they all kind of brought some of the best stuff that I've ever seen them do in this film. I am so grateful to them for trusting me, but also for illuminating what I had written, because I had an understanding based on my own experiences of what I'd written, but to see it through their eyes and through hearing the words as they spoke them, but also feeling those feelings as they felt them, it was really, I realized that they were bringing so much more to it than I could have ever imagined existed within the text. Well, one of the other things I want to talk about is The Green Knight, because I love that film, and I saw this as a sort of spiritual sister to The Green Knight in a way, and I felt like there was some connection between Gawain and Mary, and there's a very the atmosphere, the quality of the film and the feeling that I left the film, even the rhythms of the final movement of the film are very similar.
Yeah.
Like the way that you're editing and moving through time and playing with time at the end of this movie and the other and that movie, very similar. And it's I don't know. I mean, I think that you obviously started working on this while you were working on The Green Knight. Do you see that at all, or no? Did you not? Is that just me projecting?
No, I mean, I haven't thought about the correlation between the rhythm of the ending, those sort of montages that take us to the final moments and the climactic line of dialogue in both films, which aren't the same line of dialogue, but do have a similar resonance. There's a lot of direct parallels that like crowns. That
there's a lot of crowns.
Like things like that I know that are very much there, but there's plenty. I trust that there is plenty that someone could illuminate for me that I'm like, oh yes, that's very obvious, and I can't believe I never saw it before. I think that the protagonists certainly are I see myself in all of them, and so there's a kinship between Gawain and Mary and Sam. They all are parts of me, and they are. We were talking about this beforehand, but Mary sets out on a quest, and she reaches her destination very quickly on a literal level. She gets to Sam's house, but the rest of that journey is a treacherous one indeed, and it's going to be fun to think about in the years to come.
Yeah. While you were working on Mary, is there another movie that you're working on? Is the movie you're working on now basically something that was born while you were working on Mary?
It was, I've been working on a couple. I'm always like multitasking and writing my way out of emotional pits of despair. But the movie that I think will be next will definitely have a very direct through line, but then I'm sure lots of subconscious ones that I can't wait to find out about.
David, thank you so much, and congratulations on this movie.
Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America.